Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into the strictly factual timeline of a single, highly significant missile test that took place on July 6, 2026. For 60 years, the world's nuclear powers have been playing this complex, almost entirely invisible game. Because you see, it really isn't just about who has the most weapons anymore. It's about who has the ones that absolutely cannot be found. So we're going to unpack a dramatic shift in the global deterrence landscape today, an event that quietly, but fundamentally, changed the math of international security. Let's start by looking at exactly when and how this all went down.
July 6, 2026, 4:01 a.m. UTC. Out in the vast, seemingly empty waters of the Western Pacific, a Chinese nuclear-powered submarine initiated a complete surprise launch sequence. A hatch opens up beneath the surface, and a missile literally the size of a city bus erupts right into the sky. And to give you some context, prior to this exact moment, Beijing had never done something quite like this in the open ocean, in full public view.
That missile flew roughly 7,300 kilometers. Now, it was carrying a simulated dummy warhead, but honestly, the actual payload wasn't the primary message here. The sheer distance and where it came from were the real message. This test definitively proved a massive strike capability originating right out of the abyss. It was a very public demonstration of the hardest weapon in the world to destroy.
Which brings us to Chapter 1, the nuclear triad.
To really grasp why military analysts consider this test such a massive deal, we have to look at the underlying architecture of global deterrence. Great powers deliver their strategic weapons through a triad, three distinct legs: land, air, and sea. First, you have land, using missiles buried in silos or driven around on mobile launchers. Second, the air, utilizing heavy bombers. And third, the sea, via submarines. But among these three, the sea leg is universally considered the absolute most survivable.
And the contrast in vulnerability is incredibly stark. Think about it. Land-based silos, they sit at fixed, known coordinates. An adversary maps those out long before a conflict ever begins. Bombers take time to launch and can easily be intercepted. But a ballistic missile submarine? It just vanishes. It hides in a volume of water the size of an entire continent, never sitting still and never announcing itself to anyone.
Chapter 2, the logic of the second strike. All of this underwater stealth builds into a stark, surprisingly stabilizing concept, the second strike. Now, a second strike is not about attacking first. Not at all. It's the ability to answer back after you have already been hit. Imagine a scenario where a country is attacked, and its land-based missiles are destroyed before they can even fire. If that nation possesses even one hidden submarine that survives the initial attack, it can still retaliate. Because of that, an enemy's knockout blow is just never worth attempting.
As military strategists often note, it is about being impossible to disarm. This cold hard logic guarantees there is simply no such thing as a clean first blow. By ensuring that any attack will be met with severe retaliation, a mutual vulnerability is created. It's a deeply terrifying concept, sure, but paradoxically, it's what actually keeps the peace. A highly survivable second strike completely removes the temptation to go first.
Moving on to Chapter 3, the JL-3 missile range. So you might be wondering, what exactly erupted from the Pacific that day? Well, analysts broadly assess that the weapon was likely the JL-3, which is Beijing's newest and absolutely most advanced submarine-launched ballistic missile. For years now, China has been working to perfect their own sea leg of the triad, pairing a very quiet submarine with a highly reliable missile. The JL-3 really represents the culmination of a decades-long effort to perfect that specific capability.
While the July 6th test flew 7,300 kilometers, the JL-3's estimated full range actually exceeds 10,000 kilometers, and in naval warfare, range equals freedom. Older submarines, they had to sail right into heavily monitored oceans just to threaten distant targets. But with a 10,000-kilometer range, a submarine can stay safely tucked away in heavily defended coastal waters right close to home while still holding targets across the globe at risk. It essentially trades danger for distance.
Chapter 4, Strategic Timing and Signaling.
We also have to talk about the geopolitical context because a major weapons test is never solely about the weapon itself. Timing is absolutely everything. This launch did not happen during a quiet week. It converged precisely with RIMPAC, which is the massive US-led multinational naval exercise out in the Pacific. And simultaneously, China and Russia were opening up their own annual joint military drills. This sparked intense international debate over whether this was just a coincidence or a very deliberate calculation. Two vastly different perspectives emerged almost immediately. Beijing formally frames the launch as routine annual training.
They stated it was not aimed at any specific country and noted that advance notice was provided to relevant parties. On the flip side, Allied nations view it through a totally different lens, as a highly calculated strategic demonstration timed for maximum visibility. So you have the exact same event functioning as standard routine to the sender and a stark warning to the receiver.
The physical geometry of the test added even further friction to the whole situation. The missile's trajectory passed directly over the Philippine archipelago, and its splashdown occurred right near the designated South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone. This is a region with long-standing agreements to keep nuclear weapons out. Naturally, this specific flight path prompted immediate diplomatic pushback and concern from nations like Australia and New Zealand, who felt the short advance notice was just insufficient for such a massive display.
And this leads us to a really crucial policy observation derived from the whole event. Think tanks, such as CSIS, point out that these overlapping events and all this resulting diplomatic friction highlight an urgent need, specifically the need for formal, standardized launch notification agreements between nuclear powers. Their argument is that establishing clear rules of the road will reduce the risk of a test being tragically misread as an actual attack in the heat of the moment. They stress this is absolutely essential as more and more of the world's arsenals move silently underwater.
Finally, Chapter 5, The Unsearchable Ocean. Stepping back from the immediate politics, the overarching takeaway is that the undersea balance of power has definitively shifted into the open ocean. Strategists are currently completely divided on what this newly demonstrated reality means. Some argue this creates increased stability. A nation fully confident in its ability to securely retaliate from the ocean has absolutely no reason to panic or attempt a first strike. Mutual deterrence is solidified. But critics warn this merely accelerates a completely invisible undersea arms race, expanding human conflict down into the abyss. And that's the one domain where human sensors are at their absolute weakest, and the margin for misunderstanding is terrifyingly high.
Ultimately, this explainer highlights that deterrence relies on an invisible arithmetic. It is not just about what you can destroy, it's entirely about what can survive. The hardest weapon to destroy is the one you cannot see. The test on July 6th added a highly public new variable to that complex arithmetic. It leaves us to wonder just how long can the peace be kept in an ocean that is vast enough to hide an entire fleet and deep enough to give absolutely nothing away. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack the data and the deep context behind this pivotal moment in global security.